Chapter 5. Conception involves more than flesh. Those who have read my book of kin will remember that the Vedras wedding rite I described ended with the loving couple, Mila and Radomir, conceiving a child. Footnote, see the section entitled A Union of Two, a Wedding in Book 6, Chapter 5. But back then I wasn't about to ask Anastasia whether there were any particular aspects of the Vedras civilization concerning the conception of children, or whether or not it was worth paying special attention to this topic in any case. But, as though anticipating my question, she said, the Vedras people had a deep understanding of what was involved in the conception of their children. But for the moment, I do not know how to talk about it in a way that you will be able to understand. Later on, after my conversation with Anastasia's grandfather and my search for various people's rights capable of preserving love in families, I obtained some information on conception and realized that it had nothing to do with Anastasia. I was the one who had not been ready to comprehend what she said. Even now, this question has not been sufficiently researched by modern science. Scholars have been attempting to clone man, but it seems that even if they succeed, they will end up with an entity only superficially resembling man. You see, it is not just the sperm and the egg that are involved in the act of conception, but something else besides, something invisible, something not tangible as matter. It is possible that any further exposition of the information I obtained will be shocking to some. I spent 6 months pondering whether it was worth sharing with my readers or not, but in the end I decided that it was. Here is what it's all about. Many families living on the earth today are unknowingly raising children that are not their own in the fullest sense. This statement is supported by some weighty evidence. The scientific world has a term, telogamy. In medicine, it is called the paternal impression phenomenon. They try to talk as little as possible about telogamy, but what's this all about? This discovery began in England about 150 years ago when Lord Morton decided to raise a new breed of horse with exceptionally resilient characteristics. At one point, he crossed a thoroughbred mare with a zebra colt, but no offspring resulted because of the genetic incompatibility of the two species. Sometime later, this purebred English mare was crossed with a purebred English colt. Subsequently, the mare gave birth to a foal only with marked traces of stripes, as with a zebra. Lord Morton called this phenomenon telogeny. Footnote, the zebra was actually a quagga, an equine mammal of South Africa with zebra-like stripes, which is now extinct. The experiment conducted by a Scottish peer, the Right Honourable George Douglas, 16th Earl of Morton, was reported in a communication he wrote to the Royal Society of London in 1820 and described in many journal pieces of the past, for example, by J.C. Ewart of the University of Edinburgh in a 1899 article, Experimental Contributions to the Theory of Heredity, a telogamy, published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society of London, volume 65, 1899, pages 243 through 51, and later in Millennia S. Tye's article, Prenatal Influences, blah, 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 blah. And she subsequently observes, it would seem as though the Israelites had some knowledge of telogamy, for in Deuteronomy, we find when a man died leaving no issue, his wife was commanded to marry her husband's brother in order that he might raise up seed to his brother. I skipped something. Ty also mentions a female hybrid resulting from the first union. Okay. Weird. Specialists in animal husbandry quite often encounter this phenomenon in their practice. Any dog breeding club, for example, will dispose of even what was the most thoroughbred dam if it happened to mate with a mongrel. That particular dam would no longer produce thoroughbred pups, even if it were to be mated with the most thoroughbred sires. Pigeon breeders will not hesitate to kill even the most precious purebred pigeon if it has been violated by a non-thoroughbred male pigeon. Practice has shown that it will never produce purebred offspring. Scientists in various countries have done a great many studies showing that this phenomenon also extends to people. There have been instances where white parents have given birth to black children, where a black-skinned baby has come into the world as a result of a Liaison, liaison between the grandmother or mother of the birthing woman and a black man. The cause of this phenomenon always turns out to be a previous relationship with a black man on the part of the girl or one of her direct progenitors. Footnote: while dozens of scientific articles on phylogeny were published in the 19th and the first 2 decades of the 20th century by such luminaries, for example, as pioneer statistician Carl Pearson, subsequent acceptance of theories based on Gregor Johann Mendel's law of heredity brought the concept of phylogeny to disrepute, and many considered it disproved. However, present-day genetics is far from being able to fully explain the mechanisms of heredity. And throughout the 20th century, a great many prominent scholars have been conducting experiments and drawing conclusions quite at variance with the materialistic approaches of official or orthodox science. But these are clearly distinguishable cases. How many others are there that are not clearly distinguishable? After all, premarital relations are the in thing today. That being the case, there's no point in blaming the woman if she is not a virgin when she marries. It is our society, our monstrous sex propaganda and sex industry that have made her that way. In the West, parents supply their school-aged children with condoms, realizing that they are no longer chaste. But what they don't know is that there is no condom that can counter the parental impression phenomenon, or phylogeny. This is evidenced in concrete examples in the case of both people and animals. Many ancient teachings and religions also speak about the phenomenon of phylogeny. Even though they may call it something else, the substance is the same. Both scientists and wise men of old have determined that the first man in the life of a virgin leaves his imprint on her spirit and in her blood, a mental and physical portrait of her offspring to come. All other men who enter into intimate relationships with her thereafter for childbearing purposes have nothing to offer her but their semen and diseases of the flesh. Isn't this what's behind the current massive lack of understanding of fathers and children? Not to mention the degradation of our whole human society of today. A multitude of specific examples testifies to the involvement of some kind of energy in the conception of children. But if that is the case, then it is not just scientists, but the public at large that should know about it. It is probable that our recent forebears had some inkling of it. They tried to make sure that a girl entering into a marriage was a virgin beyond the shadow of a doubt. It is possible that this is what lies between the custom in many cultures of locking the newlyweds into a separate room, and subsequently hauling out and putting on display the blood-stained sheet in confirmation of the bride's virginity. Earlier ancestors of ours, however, did not consider virginity in itself sufficient to qualify someone to be a continuer of their line. They maintained that if a woman was engaged in intimate relations with one man while thinking about another, the resulting offspring would bear resemblance to the one that she was thinking about. Such statements indicate that people of old assumed, and quite possibly knew for certain, that the most important factor in conception was thought, or more specifically, the energy of thought. The phenomenon of telogyny also testifies to this. A woman, perhaps subconsciously, retains information in her memory about the first man in her life. As a result, a child is born who either fully or partially resembles him. At first, I hesitated to write about this subject for fear of provoking unpleasant questions among parents and their children and between spouses. Let them be happy in their ignorance. However, such happiness has not been all that noticeable. And perhaps one of the reasons it is not particularly noticeable is a lack of knowledge as to the culture of conception. The question of sex education courses for children in schools has been an issue for some time now. People argue over whether they should be introduced or not. If such courses touch only upon the use of condoms, there's no point in introducing the courses at all. If, however, children are told about the woman's chief purpose, about the correct approach to conceiving children, in that case, the subject is absolutely essential. For that, however, the instructors must have a thorough grounding in the very essence of the question and have appropriate literature available. It is a subject that must be discussed, even though the mass media, unfortunately, serves up nothing but sex propaganda. There is a lot of talk in so-called democratic countries about human freedom, but can a man be called truly free when important questions of life are hidden from him, and in their place, allegedly beneficial perversions are fobbed off on him through some kind of supposedly free propaganda? In a situation like that, it turns out that man is liberated only from a true and happy human life. Still, I wouldn't have written about telogyny if I hadn't learned from Anastasia about how to correct this situation, even if the marriage-bound woman has already had a relationship with another man. Our pagan ancestors, the Vedras, all the more so, were very well acquainted with what is known in modern medicine as the paternal impression phenomenon, and through the help of special rites, they were able to protect their young people against it. With the aid of particular acts or rites, wise men too were able to erase the genetic code of the first sire and make even girls who had been raped during enemy attacks absolutely clean. As proof of this, they were not afraid to let their sons take such women into marriage. However, there is one but. It is impossible to understand and reproduce pagan, especially Vedras, rites simply through a knowledge of their outward aspects. They must be experienced through feeling. What's the use in just writing about it? It is essential to love. It is essential to prepare for the appearance of a child. It is important to give birth only at home, at the very place of conception. To preserve love in the family forever, it is essential to combine into one 3 points, 3 feelings, 3 planes of being. But what's the point in simply restating the words? An intellectual understanding is far from sufficient. It must be felt. The philosophy of our forebears must be felt. And the first essential act must be one of sheer repentance in respect to our forebears, who are now called pagans, who have been slandered and whom we have betrayed. We betrayed the traditional Slavic culture of our fathers and mothers, a culture that lasted for tens of thousands of years Instead, we started calling Christianity traditional for Rus. But in Rus, it has been around for a mere 1,000 years. There's no way that it can be classified as traditional. Why is repentance necessary? For this simple reason that if we go on thinking of our ancestors as wild, dull-witted barbarians, as we are urged to believe, but still adopt their rites, those rites will have no effect. After all, such rites are founded on a knowledge of the cosmos, of the designated purpose of the planets, and on a knowledge of the power of mental energy, the power of thought. Even if we try harnessing the tremendous energy of our thought with the aid of their rites, we shall not obtain any positive results, since our thought will be contradicted by another thought of ours, namely that the Vedras people were ignorant. Here is a paradox. If you are an ignorant fool, but your acts are marvelous, the one excludes, or at least contradicts, the other. Perhaps the culture of our forebears is being deliberately concealed from us. After all, a bunch of ignorant and disoriented people, cut off from their roots, are easier to control. Perhaps this is God's retribution to our civilization. Popular wisdom says, "What you sow, you shall reap." We have broken the ties with our forebears, and consequently, the threads linking us with our children are also being broken. We can get another glimpse of the elevated culture of our pagan forebears in the question of conception of children by examining the traditions that are even today preserved in modern China and especially Japan, where a man and a woman are about to enter into intimate relations for the purpose of conceiving a child, undergo a special rite of purification. The beliefs of ancient China, Japan, India, and ancient Greece, and these are traditionally ancient pagan countries, lay tremendous emphasis on the matter of conception. So what then can anyone do? Can anyone do who desires to bring forth good offspring? Okay, so what then can anyone do who desires to bring forth good offspring? Should they first spend a lot of time studying the volumes of literature on this subject, besides spending a lot of time on studying treatises on choosing one's soulmate and on the education of children? I can tell you right off, there is absolutely no need to waste part of one's own life on such a study. I myself spent several years not studying such sources, but simply familiarizing myself with them, and I came to the sudden realization that the Vedras people have condensed all their monumental works into a system of simple, cheerful, and rational rites covering all events of one's life. It gives the impression that God himself helped them in formulating these rites, as well as in understanding the essence of man's existence. Before attempting to apply the experience of our ancestors, we need to determine which ancestors. I mean, how many years ago, and which territories of present-day Russia were settled by our forebears. As is known, history textbooks, including those written in Russia, tell about people's lives in Egypt and Rome of 5,000 years ago. These countries have carried out and are still carrying out archaeological excavations which draw huge crowds of tourists every year. Russian history, on the other hand, if we take the word of even our own history books, covers a mere 1,000-year period. That would mean our country's territory before that time was somehow home to a culturally backward people, or maybe there wasn't anybody there at all. Either that, or possibly somebody's been deliberately hiding our history from us. Indeed, they have. I have already written about this, but now I should like to present some archaeological data. I shall tell you about Arkham, a place which has a direct connection with the question of telogyny. According to Anastasia's grandfather, it was there that 3,500 years ago a remarkable discovery was made.